Let's go to the game, and then let me open up YouTube on my phone so that way I can see your guys' comments and things that you leave. My channel. So for those that don't know who I am, or maybe you're new to the channel, I am Alex the Historian, and I do all those Queen Mary and Disneyland documentaries that you guys all love, and I'm not very impressive to look at, but people tend to really love my storytelling abilities and my knowledge on things. We're going to go through Titanic. This is the Titanic Honor and Glory, or I guess technically they call it now the Demo 401. But this is created by the Titanic Honor and Glory team, and this is a free demo. The link is in the description below, so you can download it as well for free. But we will be able to see Titanic in all its glory. And I do this every couple of months. I do one of these live streams every couple of months just because it's so fun. First and foremost, I say this with every one of my Titanic live streams. I am not a Titanic specialist. I don't have a particular expertise in Titanic. But that being said, I do know a lot about Titanic. I know a lot about ocean liners. However, the RMS Queen Mary is my favorite ocean liner, so you'll probably hear me talking a lot about the Queen Mary and comparing it to Titanic in this live stream because there's a lot of similarities there, and that's kind of how I understand things, is through comparing it to Queen Mary and then kind of going, oh, okay, so this is like that. And so I hope you'll understand. This is not a history lesson about the Titanic. This is just having fun. We're just exploring this beautiful ship created by the Titanic Honor and Glory team. And my graphics are working especially well today. Sometimes it's a bit finicky, so sometimes I have to lower the graphics quality. It's really weird. My computer has a mind of its own. But hello, everyone. Hello, Five Caps Films. Hello, Evan, Dino DeSantis, Kevin. How's it going? Maybe it's just that I haven't been using, maybe I haven't been on this this game in a long time, but the graphics look unbelievably real. I could swear. I think it's just because I haven't been playing this in months. I think the last time I did one of these live streams was in April. But let's go ahead and go down. And by the way, anybody who's watching this, you can ask me to go anywhere on the ship. And as long as it's available in the game for me to go there, I'll go there. But yeah, let me know if you want me to go to somewhere in particular. I've also slowed down the mouse sensitivity, so that way I don't make you guys all super, super motion sick trying to look around the ship. But we are on C deck now, looking at the first class purser's office. Pretty neat. Let's see here. Hunter, no, I didn't lose any weight. I really should. I'm going to be going on a big adventure next year, and I really should be fit for it. Five Caps Film says, can you go to the Satinwood suite? Yeah, if I remember which one it is. I always forget. Or was it, did I just pass it? I don't remember if it was this one. No, it's not. But we'll come back to this one because this one's everyone's favorite. But let's see. We'll go down this way. Titanic does have a certain beauty. And, you know, I'm not 100% a Titanic fan. Like I said, I'm really more 100% a Queen Mary fan. And the reason being is like, well, Titanic, you look at it and it's like beautiful, right? You look at it and you're just like, this is just fantastic. It's just amazing. I agree. But the beauty of Titanic is only where it's at. There are limits to where the beauty is on the ship. And with Queen Mary, that's not necessarily the case. You know, Queen Mary is decorated um, all over, whereas Titanic only has very specific areas that are decorated. I'm already lost. Yeah, I'm already lost because I could have sworn it was on C deck. Maybe it's on this side. I see a little bit of daylight up ahead, so when I see daylight, I know that's one of the cabins that's open. All right, so let's see. Can you, okay. Hunter says, hope you reach 100,000 subs by the end of the year. Yeah, I hope so too. I'm really counting on it. Okay, I think this is one of the suites that leads to... Oh, wait. I haven't been in this one before. Man, every time I play this game, I always find something new. Wow. Yeah, I haven't been in this one before. This is unbelievable. Look at the wood grain. I love wood paneling, especially from, from the 1890s all the way through the 19 through to the basically to the year 1940. I love wood paneling, especially when it's like a type of marquetry like this is. How they do all these different types of wood and then they combine them to create shapes and patterns and things. It's beautiful. Beautiful. And it's really sad because when you talk about wood paneling to most people, they picture the 1970s like home office kind of wood paneling where it's just like oak slats that are vertical and they're just, it looks horrible. But the marquetry wood paneling is absolutely beautiful. And it would have been all real wood, Look at this. Just look at that right there in the center of the screen. Unbelievably beautiful. And I've never been in this room before, and I must have played this game 100 times. And look, over the porthole windows, they have these sliding glass screens that are, it appears to be stained glass. It could be faux stained glass, but this being the 1910s, I highly doubt this was faux stained glass. This had to have been real at the time. But, geez, look at that. So that's cool. This is a room I've never been. Yeah, I don't remember how to get to that satinwood room. I was there before. I know I was. An interesting thing about ocean liners, which you'll see in this game, is that they can be very labyrinthine. They can be very easy to, you can easily get lost in them. And 5cap says it's on B deck. Okay. Good morning. I'm sorry, I have to bring this up to my face because I can't read this. Largs Bay Paul. Oh, cool. Good morning from Sydney, Australia. Let's see. Titanic's second class was like first class on other ships of the luxurious cabins and rooms. Yes, indeed. And same thing could be said for Queen Mary. When Queen Mary came out, Queen Mary's first class was... No, I'm sorry. Queen Mary's second class was like first class on other ships at the time, except for SS Normandy, of course. But, yeah, okay, so B deck. All right, we have to go up one. Okay. And I'm pretty sure it's on port side. Is this port side? I actually don't remember. Yeah, because that should be aft up there. So yeah, this is the starboard side actually. So, here we go. So this room, I think this one in front of us, I don't think this particular room was used in the movie Titanic, but it does have this this private promenade is what they called it, and this was used in the movie Titanic. They kind of combined several rooms to create the suites that Rose and her family stayed in. This is the satinwood room, which is just beautiful. Satinwood is one of my favorite types of wood veneer that was used on many ocean liners. My other favorite is Macassar ebony, but I also love quilted maple as well. Quilted maple looks like satinwood. It's just much smaller wood grain. But look how beautiful this is. And um, the video game doesn't quite capture it, but the thing about like satinwood and quilted maple is you can kind of see along the walls how the wood grain creates this kind of wavy effect, right? Well, in real life, if you were standing in front of it, it would look very three-dimensional, like you've taken a satin sheet and just casually tossed it on a bed or something, and it creates these little waves, and you haven't straightened it out yet. And it has that weird 3D effect, but it's so beautiful. And the 3D effect kind of shines gold or satin color. um, Satin gold, I guess I should say. But yeah, this is that suite, and it's a beautiful room. MH Real says, "This is so cool. Love your videos." Thank you. Yeah, I recently saw a video of the suites on the Queen Mary, and I was blown away how beautiful they are. Yes. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of Titanic fans who really don't like Queen Mary. And it's because, well, and yeah. And I suppose I should say there are also a few Queen Mary fans that don't really like Titanic. And the reason why is because it comes down to a differing set of tastes when it comes to the different styles. Like Titanic was built, basically in the Edwardian era. So there's a lot of Edwardian styles, which Edwardian styles really are just made up of neoclassical styles, right? And everybody loves neoclassical styles to a certain extent, even if you love it 100% or you love it only, 20%. But the Queen Mary was designed in Art Deco style, more specifically streamlined modern, but Art Deco nonetheless. And the thing about Art Deco style is it's luxurious, but it's not like this. This kind of luxury is like, you look up here and you can see the finely carved details in the wood, right? And you can see little tulips and things just carved into the wood. And people often say, well, this is the height of luxury when you see that kind of detail. And it's like, well, yes, that can be it. But with Queen Mary, the Queen Mary was designed in a more subtle luxury because in the 1930s, people saw this, right? What we're looking at, people saw this as kind of a bit gaudy, a bit flaunty, like, oh, we're showing off how fancy we are, and people in the 30s, they thought of that as like the kind of wealth that their grandparents loved, So they wanted something more subtle. And so Art Deco came to replace that. Art Deco was about its subtlety, and about kind of reading between the lines to understand why something is luxurious when you're looking at it. And so for people who like Titanic, they can't stand looking at the Queen Mary. They think the Queen Mary is ugly. They're like, oh, it's not luxurious at all. It's like, actually, it's more luxurious than Titanic was. Not to, criticize Titanic. That's not what this is about. But every major ocean liner that basically came out, one after another, the next flagship, if you will, of every company was always more luxurious than the ones before it. And so each time there was always a ship that was more luxurious than the last. So eventually it would come out that, of course, a ship would come out and be more luxurious than Titanic. There were things on the Queen Mary that were offered and given to people in first class that just weren't available on Titanic. And there were things that aspects of the experience that were more luxurious than Titanic. That's not to say, again, that Titanic is anything less. It's not. We're not putting down Titanic. We're just stating history here. And eventually, everything gets overshadowed. Now, whether or not you agree that that luxury is more luxurious is a different matter entirely. Like, for instance, one of the more modern ships I like is the Queen Mary 2, the modern ocean liner that's currently sailing the ocean, and eventually I will be able to get on a voyage on that ship. But I think it's a beautiful, luxurious ship, right? I love the way it looks, how it's got a modern Art Deco style to it, all that jazz. But they came out with a new cruise ship for the Cunard line called the Queen Anne, right? And it's been all over the news, so I'm sure a lot of you folks might have heard about it. The Queen Anne is their newest cruise ship. And it's supposedly more luxurious than the Queen Mary 2 because it's like 20 years younger. But when you look at the Queen Anne, it's designed in a very modern style. They claim that it's influenced by Art Deco, and yeah, there is a teeny weeny little bit of Art Deco influence in the Queen Anne. However, it's mostly influenced by modern tastes, so it looks very sterile. There's lots of metal, like stainless steel, aluminum, lots of marble, and flat white or gray or black. It's very, how I would describe, sad. It's very kind of like depressing. It's lacking color in a lot of places. Sure, there's some color and some stuff here and there. This is another beautiful room I like, by the way, because of the paneling. The paneling with the triangular shapes. I love that. Anyway, but with Queen Anne, it's very sterile. The type of design that the Queen Anne has. And so, yes, it is by fact more luxurious than the Queen Mary 2, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I would prefer to sail in that ship. I actually still would prefer to sail on the Queen Mary 2, not just because it's an ocean liner as opposed to a cruise ship, but just because I prefer the older styles more. I prefer the color. I prefer the wood paneling. I prefer the more grounded elements. And so I guess that's my long way of saying that people who think the Queen Mary is ugly and think the Titanic is more beautiful, that's because they prefer those Edwardian styles. They prefer this look. And, and you can see why. I think it's beautiful too. But I personally prefer Art Deco style, and the Queen Mary is my thing. So, and so that's why I kind of don't like that rivalry that people kind of have, because there's a lot of people who they can't get Titanic out of their mind. They're just like, oh, Titanic was the best there ever was. And it's like, and that's not just with luxury. They mean that for everything. Everything. In terms of machinery, in terms of engineering, in terms of all that kind of stuff. And they go, Titanic was the best. There was nothing that replaced it that was better. And I don't understand that, because Titanic is literally at the bottom of the ocean and the Queen Mary is still floating. So I'm like, how could Titanic have literally been the best when there were many ships that outlasted it? You know, Titanic sank on its maiden voyage. There were obviously things, and 1,500 people perished in that incident. By the way, we're coming up on the this is the Café Parisien. which is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I love the detail in this. I kind of wish Queen Mary had something like this. Queen Mary did sort of have something like this. She had a garden lounge for third class that looked a bit similar at the time. A bit similar. It had the wicker furniture and it had the plants and everything. Lots of little palm trees and stuff like that. But it didn't have this lattice work and stuff. It had wood paneling for the sides of it and stuff. But it didn't look quite like this. This is nice and airy and light and beautiful. And by the way, kudos to the people who did the graphics for this, because I'm looking at this right now and this could be a modern photograph in 2025 of a replica of Cafe Parisien, because that's how realistic this looks. This looks absolutely amazing. And this is only the demo version. This isn't even the actual game that they're developing. The actual game they're developing will have much better graphics than this and be much more realistic looking, which is just hard to believe because this is so good. Let's see. 5 Cap Film says, my video keeps pausing every 30 seconds. That's not happening on mine. I don't know. Folks, let me know if yours is pausing every 30 seconds. Let's see. MH Real says, modern day luxury isn't the same. Yeah, I agree. 5 Caps Film says, I'd say the most beautiful room on the ship is the smoking room. I think you're talking about Queen Mary, or maybe you're talking about Titanic. I can't tell. Luna says, I love both ships. They're unique in their own way. Indeed, they are. MH Real says, this is so much finer than modern day luxury. Yeah, it is. Let's switch to another room. Do some dorm room have the same silly wood as the Queen Mary? What? Artie. It's like the Madsen. You can still see old. I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm having difficulty understanding. But let's move to. This is another one of my favorite places on Titanic. This is the a la carte restaurant. And one of the reasons why I love it so much is, first, it has a lot of purple. Purple is my favorite color. Unless that's pink. But you know what? I've recently learned that I have difficulty differentiating certain shades of pink with certain shades of purple. I didn't know I had that issue until my friend Shiloh pointed that out. So sometimes I look at something and I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful shade of purple. And then like Shiloh will be like, that's actually pink. So anyway, so some paneling can be found in the second class library lounge. Yeah, that's true. MH Real says the stream is fine on their end. That's good. Insanely Average says, why no 4K? They need to check their video card. My is fantastic. So if you're asking why this stream isn't in 4K, I could technically stream this in 4K. I'm actually not sure how to do it on the YouTube side, but the software that's recording my screen right now can record in 4K. But one of the things is that I don't stream in 4K because I honestly don't know if like my computer can handle it, because this demo game is actually quite demanding on the computer system. And while I do have a pretty decently powerful computer, it is taking a lot of work to run this game. Actually, you know, this game is running a lot more smoothly than it usually does. I did upgrade or update my graphics driver just before going live. And so that might be why this game is running so smoothly. But yeah, so this is a cool shot. I love coming back into this room and seeing this. This is so cool. I wish I had the ability to control the lights and turn all the lights on, so that way it would look even nicer. But MH says, look at all the fine marble. Yeah, the marble on the countertops back in the a la carte restaurant. Yeah, that was really beautiful. And then there's a lot of gold leaf. Let me see if I can crouch. These railing details done in gold leaf. Absolutely beautiful. And the cherub for the lamp light. Insanely Average says, what about the Titanic 2 from the billionaire who's building it in China? He's not building that. He's been saying that since I was a kid. He's been saying, I'm going to build the Titanic 2. He's been saying it since I was a teenager. And now I'm a 30-something-year-old man, and you know, it's not happening. He never intends to do it. Never intends to build it. He's not going to do it. He says it, in my opinion, because he's just trying to keep his company in the newspapers. Every couple of years he announces it to keep his company name in the newspapers, and that's basically it. He's not going to build it. He never has. There's no plans. And it's funny because every time he announces it as though it's going to be launched the next year, which is not possible. It takes at least 3 years to build a ship in today's world. It takes at least 3 years. But he talks about it like he's like, oh, we're going to start construction on it, and it's going to launch next year. It's like, yeah, right. Like, yeah, right. So, yeah, that's how you know, folks, that he's not serious. So, and the newspapers love it. They love to hear that. Oh, Clive Palmer's going to build the Titanic 2. Isn't that amazing? And he never does. All right, let's go down to the first class restaurant. By the way, folks, again, if there's somewhere on the ship that you want to see, let me know in the chat, and then I'll go there, because I know a lot of you folks either don't have this game or can't get it for your computer. And so I don't mind showing you what things look like. This is the inside of the purser's office. I mean, this specifically is a part of the purser's office that handles the movement of telegrams from the telegraph machine, the Marconi. And then this back here is just the regular part of the purser's desk, which handles a lot of stuff. This is a poster for an upcoming project, Project 401, which is basically a lot like this demo, but it'll be kind of like a museum, and it will have, I believe, like daytime changes and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's the actual Titanic Honor and Glory game, which is probably a couple years away from being completed. We're coming down to D deck, which is a slightly taller deck, because this is the deck with the first class restaurant. But I like showing some of this stuff because, Queen Mary had a bit of this kind of stuff as well. So here you see that the front side of the windows is, the stained glass. And then if they open it up, you can see there's portholes behind it. And that's because during the daytime, the daylight would shine through the portholes and then through the stained glass, illuminating it. Looks beautiful. It's a beautiful effect. But at nighttime, when there's no daylight, they have these light bulbs that are together in series. They're a tube, incandescent tube, not fluorescent. Some people think that tube lights were always fluorescent, but these were incandescent. Anyway, they would illuminate very brightly at night, and it provided a continuation of the light coming through the stained glass effect. Wasn't as bright as daytime, but still pretty bright. And you have all this wicker furniture. It's a nice little lounging area for when people are waiting to get into the first class restaurant. So the center part of the restaurant has its lights on, so I guess this is the easier part to see. All the tables are set. Every last table in this room. And this room is probably the most detailed room in the game due to all the table settings and everything, because it makes my computer run really slow. But this is the captain's table. Okay, so MH Real says, is this available on Steam? Yes, it certainly is. Luna says, can you scroll wheel zoom in and out? Yes, you can. I just don't do it because when I start up the game, the what do you call it? The point of view is a certain way that I like it. But when you scroll and zoom in and then you zoom back out to where you were, it doesn't quite return to where you were. And so it kind of misses the mark for some reason. And so then I can't stand it, because then the rest of the game, it's always off and it just looks a little bit too zoomed out or a little bit too zoomed in. You can never get it right to where it is right now, unless you do it manually and you go into the settings and then you find it. And I just don't want to do that. I don't like that. So I haven't. So this is, I guess they have some lights on over here. Yeah. But then over here they have it turned off. So you can kind of see what it looks like when some of the lights are off and when some of the lights are on. Very nice. And then what I really like too is the wood carvings on this piece here. Diamond. Hello, Diamond. Evan Scott says, when are you seeing the Queen Mary again, Alex? I don't know. It's certainly not going to be this year. Not unless something last minute happens that allows me to go, but it's not going to be this year. I might be there for the 90th anniversary of the maiden voyage in May. Maybe. I really don't know. What I can tell you right now, though, is for a couple of years now, I've been talking about going, and this is a major announcement, by the way, you guys. For last couple of years, I've been talking about going to the UK aboard the Queen Mary 2 and spending a couple of weeks in Europe, basically going all around the UK and then Paris, and then we might even go to another country. We haven't decided which one yet, because I finally have all the money to do it. And so as soon as the government, the US government, is back up and running again, I have to start applying for my passport. But yeah, so I will definitely be going next year to the UK. We've already planned out like which voyage we're going to take aboard the Queen Mary 2, because we're going to go to Europe aboard the Queen Mary 2, and then we're also going to come back to the US aboard the Queen Mary 2. And we're doing it like that because I don't want to cross the Atlantic on an airplane. I hate airplanes. I'm not afraid of them. I just really hate being in an airplane. And the less time I spend in an airplane, the happier I will be. Plus, also, I think the Queen Mary 2 is really cool, and I really want to take a voyage both ways. So that will be happening, and so we're planning out the fine details because we also discovered that based off of the voyages we're going, we'll have a lot of time in Europe, and so there might even be time to go to an additional country. So we're going to talk about, what country and where exactly we're going to go. Because originally we were just planning the UK and France. But we have so much time on our hands that we're like, maybe we can see another country. This is the Turkish baths in the Titanic. Another really beautiful room. Let me check my comments real quick. Let's Can you go into one of the room hallways, sort of like you are going to enter? Which one? Let's see. 5 caps films, yeah, field of view aperture. It does change when you mess with it by zooming in and out. It never returns to this exact field of view. It's slightly off. And like I said, you can reset it back using like the manual settings in the menu. I just don't want to do that. Here is the electric bath. This is part of the Turkish baths. They do different kinds of therapies in the Turkish baths. This is the electric bath. And basically, excuse me, oh my goodness. Basically, the electric bath is a box full of light bulbs. Back when Titanic was first introduced, electricity was still new for a lot of people. Not everybody had electricity in their homes. Mostly the rich did. But they considered electricity, and especially light bulbs, to be still somewhat of like a miracle device. And so they thought that if you bathed in electric lamplight, it was good for you. It was good for your skin. It was good for your body. And so this electric bath is basically just a bunch of light bulbs, and you're just, in a high concentration of electric light. It really does nothing for you. Electric lamps does nothing for you. But they had these electric baths even on the Queen Mary. So the Queen Mary also had Turkish baths, and they had a electric bath just like that one. Mostly it was probably all steel instead of wood at the bottom, but yeah. And then this is a hydrotherapy room. They just basically sprayed water on you in many different ways, and water. You can kind of see why some people might think it was soothing or therapeutic, because even to this day, when you go to a really fancy, what do you call it? Like I can't even think of what it's called now. Masseuse, salon. I can't think about it. When you go to a really fancy place that offers these kinds of therapies and things, why can't I think of what they're called? They still offer various hydrotherapies. A lot of times it's basically a giant warm swimming pool. Sometimes it's gosh, my words are failing me right now. Like a whirlpool jet thing. People sit in them like a jacuzzi. There we go. So they got something kind of like a jacuzzi. And you can kind of see how the movement of water can be soothing and therapeutic for people. And so you can kind of understand why they would have things like hydrotherapy rooms. They don't actually make your health any better, but they do decrease stress, which I guess overall is good for your health. This is the various drying rooms. They have a wet room, which is basically a sauna. And then they have a hot dry room, which is this one. This is like a sauna, but without the steam. And then they have this cold or cool drying room. So this one is it's, I don't even know what temperature, but it's a bit cooler, slightly cooler than what's generally considered comfortable. So maybe in the high 60 degrees Fahrenheit. But part of the therapy was taking a dip in the swimming bath. Now, it's important to say that back then, these weren't always called swimming pools. A lot of times they're referred to as swimming baths. And these are very small, as you can tell. I was actually asked why Queen Mary's swimming pool was not very big. You might say Titanic's is small because Titanic, maybe compared to Queen Mary, is smaller. But really, the reason why these swimming pools were so small, partly because they were on ocean liners, is really because it's about how many people are visiting the pool. And so the pool is not going to be packed with people. And so they don't need a very large pool. And people didn't really swim necessarily in these pools. They kind of just bobbed around like apples. You know, they might have laid on their back. They might have did a few, some diving, maybe some jumping. Like on Queen Mary, people would jump into the pool for fun. I don't think they did that on Titanic, but maybe they did. But mainly, it was called a swimming bath because the idea was that you're floating in water, and that's part of the therapy. That's part of the rejuvenation of you. And so it wasn't really about swimming. So they didn't need a pool to be large. It just needed to be large enough to fit all the people that were going into the pool. And same thing for Queen Mary's pool. In 1936, it was a little bit bigger than this. Certainly twice the width, that's for sure. But it wasn't much bigger. And even at twice the width, it still wasn't large enough for swimming. You got to the other side in no time at all. So, yeah, I get that a lot. People ask me, why aren't the pools really that big? How can you swim in something so small? And it's because you didn't really swim so much as just kind of bobbed around or dipped your head in the water, or maybe just dove into the water. And then here's the showers for getting it off. So the pools on Titanic and Queen Mary and many other ships the like were salt water, and they were filtered salt water. So the salt water from the sea would be brought into the water softening plants of the ships. And they would be filtered for large debris and then filtered for smaller debris. And then they were put through an electrolyzer. I don't know if it was on Titanic, but on Queen Mary, it was put through an electrolyzer. And the electrolyzer supplied a charge to the salt water. And that charge converted some of the salt, some of the salt water, I should say, it converted some of it into chlorine. And so some people say, oh, well, these pools were chlorinated, but that makes it sound like it's like a modern pool where they're literally injecting the water with chlorine to a certain amount. But it really wasn't like that. Mainly what kept these pools clean was the fact that they were filtered and then they were made of salt water. and there was a slight little bit of chlorine just because it was put through the electrolyzer, which makes the water sterile. Again, I don't know if Titanic had an electrolyzer for its pool water, but the Queen Mary did, and the electrolyzer was there to sanitize, but the process of sanitizing it also partly converted some of the water, a very tiny amount, into chlorine. And so in a way, I guess you could say it was chlorinated, but not to the degree that our modern swimming pools are. Watertight door with some mechanisms to open it, including, well, there's also a fire hose here, but like there's a wrench for helping to open the watertight door. Interesting. So let us go this way. People always want me to go over here to show them what this is because, you know, it's a big winding hallway. They want to know what's going on. But really, it's got a dead end. You can't open any of these doors. Might as well go back the way we came. But you can kind of see how, like I said earlier, well, actually, two things I said earlier. So some people say, well, you know, Titanic was so beautiful. Well, again, look at the ceiling. Bare steel. So they really, with Titanic and Olympic and the other ships, the like, they were really selective about what they decorated on the ships. Whereas with Queen Mary, they just went and decorated everything. All three classes had fully decorated areas. Some of them more beautiful than others, but nevertheless, there was very rarely, if ever, any way to see the bare steel of the ship. But with Titanic, there's plenty of places where you can see that. But the other thing I was going to say was that, like a labyrinth. I was saying earlier that Titanic was like a labyrinth. And so was a lot of other ocean liners of its time. In fact, even the Queen Mary 2 today, being a real ocean liner, is also kind of like a labyrinth. They weren't designed like cruise ships today, where cruise ships, they have very long corridors and everything is either straight up and down accessible, like stairs and elevators, or horizontally accessible, like long connecting hallways. There were parts of ocean liners that really, you really had to zigzag through the ship, both vertically and horizontally, to reach certain places. And, you know, that's because ocean liners have these really high watertight bulkheads that kind of separate the different areas, as well as the fact that there's lots of designs and things that they have to bring the center of gravity further down on an ocean liner because it relies on its center of gravity for stability a lot more than a cruise ship would. A cruise ship actually puts a lot of heavy reliance on its stabilizers, its onboard stabilizers, to keep it level. But ocean liners, they have to be built to a certain degree with the idea in mind that its stabilizers may not be helpful in extreme situations. And so the ocean liner must be able to be stable on its own without those stabilizers. It's hard to describe because a lot of people will be like, well, actually, Alex, but there are situations like on the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary didn't receive stabilizer fins until 1958, and the Queen Mary went into service in 1936. And so the ship for nearly 20 years was, well, actually over 20 years, was without any form of stabilization. It was only the design of the ship itself that was meant to keep it stable in really rough seas. The ship was known to roll quite a lot without the stabilizers. But there were people that spoke that said, well, you know, the thing about the stabilizers was that in really, really rough weather, they had to pull the stabilizer fins in because they were not strong enough at the time to withstand extreme weather. And so there were former crew members that had mentioned that. And it was true. It was very true. I think people are surprised to hear that because they go, well, what's the point of the stabilizer fins if you have to pull them in during really rough weather? And in actuality, the stabilizer fins were really meant for mild or slightly moderate weather. and to keep the ship stable during then. But once the waves started getting really high, yeah, you can forget about it. So let's go to another place that isn't quite decorated on the Titanic. I mean, to a certain extent it is, but not really. We're going to go to Scotland Road. So, a spa. Yes, 5 Caps Films. Yes, that's the word I was looking for earlier that I could not figure out. Spa. Let's see. History on the Lakes says, "Hi Alex, long time no see. Awesome. Good to see you here." History on the Lakes says, "When you get the chance, could we see the engine room and the boiler room? If not, that's fine." Yeah, we can definitely do that. Mango says, "Hey Alex, I have a question for you. Out of all the rooms aboard the Queen Mary, which one is your favorite? Mine is the first class lounge. I just love the elegance and atmosphere there." So I would say, of all the rooms that, oh man, yawning for no reason. Of all the rooms that still exist aboard the Queen Mary, I would agree that the first class main lounge is probably my favorite. It is a very beautiful room, and a lot of it's currently being restored, so it's kind of returning back to its former beauty, especially with the unicorns and battle artwork that was recently restored, and it looks so amazing. No one's seen it look that good in at least 50 years, if not more. So that's really cool. But there is a room that no longer exists on the ship necessarily that used to be my favorite, and that was the second class overflow lounge on A deck on the Queen Mary. And that room was really beautiful in the 1930s, but they removed it and replaced it with a teenager's lounge in the 1950s. And then that teenager's lounge was eventually replaced with what it is today, which is the Capstan Lounge, which is nothing but a white room where they do some special events in. It just doesn't look that good. So it, unfortunately, but yeah, the overflow lounge for second class was was my favorite room prior, to its removal. So let's see. MH Real says, "I know this seems like a dumb question, but how did they power so much electricity through old ships back then?" I can actually show you that. This is a steward's bathroom, by the way, folks, just in case you're wondering. Yes, they did have urinals even back in the days of Titanic. And they have these large wash sinks. They have these regular hand sinks. By the way, these large wash sinks, they had these even on Queen Mary. There were special rooms where you got just this, and basically you could take like a shower slash bath. You don't get inside the tub. That's not what you do. You stand beside it, but you can use it to kind of fill a giant basin and scrub yourself, and like a sponge bath essentially. But I think on Queen Mary they also had a shower head above, and the room had a floor drain, so you could shower in that room as well. But they had these giant sinks in there, like one of them in each room. But yeah, and then but this is for the crew on the Titanic, and these are the toilets, the toilet rooms. But on Queen Mary, they had a separate shower booth. And what's interesting is the toilet seats all over Titanic. They had these wooden toilet seats, very common back then. They were easily removable. They didn't screw in or anything like that. They just kind of like sat there on the toilet. And the idea was that after each use, they would be changed out, and then the one that was removed would be sanitized. How sanitized it was, I don't really know, but but that was the idea. So let's show you guys some of the engineering spaces on the ship, and kind of we'll start with electricity to show you guys how the ship generated electricity. Darren says, hi, I just found this channel recently, and whoa, what just happened? I saw there was like a glitch. Hi, I just found this channel recently, and I am a fan of the channel. Awesome, thanks. Oh, this was another spot I wanted to show you guys real quick since we're passing right by it. This is the third class dining rooms, dining saloons, I should say, for Titanic. All of the chairs are kind of bolted into the floor, but they were designed to swivel. So the bolts allowed you to kind of swivel the chair so you could sit in it. And then the idea was just like my desk chair, you sat in it from the side and then you swivel into position. And that's how these chairs worked. So you couldn't pull them out. And the reason why they were bolted down was because, again, unlike modern cruise ships today, which really rely on their stabilizers to keep them steady, these old ocean liners relied on their size, their shape, their hydrodynamic design to keep them steady. But that wasn't always 100% guaranteed to be a steady ride. Sometimes the ocean just had different plans and the ships would roll. And I do remember hearing that Olympic was quite a roller, so I imagine that Titanic was also quite a roller as well. So yeah, you needed a lot of furniture to be bolted down on these old ships. Okay, I had to remember where I was again. After we see sort of the engine rooms and the power plant and all that kind of stuff, we'll go see the boiler rooms. Oh, I keep forgetting there's nothing really to see on some of these side corridors, but we are still on Scotland Road, which is the service corridor on Titanic. Many of these superliners had service corridors because the ships were so huge that they needed to be able to get people from one end of the corridor to the other, or one end of the ship to the other. And so these service corridors allowed them to do that without being seen by first or second class passengers. That being said, third class used part of Scotland Road to get around. But you can see how useful this kind of corridor was, because you could get from one side of the ship to the other relatively quickly. Queen Mary also had a service corridor. Hers was not called Scotland Road. Queen Mary's was called Burma Road. In fact, if you want to learn a lot of detail like this, like the stuff I'm spouting out to you guys right now about the Queen Mary, I actually have a website, RMSQM Wiki. The link is in the description below. But it's basically a Wikipedia, but for Queen Mary, and it is its own website. So you could learn all this stuff. There's pictures, photographs, lots of information, and it's all got, what do you call it? Citations, so that way you can see where the information was taken from. It's a wonderful website, you guys. You can learn not just about Queen Mary, but by learning about Queen Mary, you can learn about ocean liners over time. You can learn everything about engineering, art, the history, and even the modern day stuff, like what's going on with the ship right now. You can learn all that from RMSQM Wiki. And you can even just type in Google, rmsqmwiki.org, and it will show up. So, yeah, It's a free website. You don't need to pay nothing. There's no ads or anything like that. It's entirely free to everybody. Now, folks, we are inside the what they call the aft engine room on Titanic, because believe it or not, there were 2 engine rooms. This room mainly housed the the turbine engine or turbo engine, whichever you want to call it. They were called both. But when the main engines of Titanic were operating, they could exhaust into this machine. And it's hard to see, but basically, you see there's a huge, here, I'll use the zoom, huge white box here. This is one of the condensers. And then on the other side of the room, there's the other condenser. But they exhaust, or they receive their exhaust from this center thing, which was the turbine, the steam turbine. And I believe it had a horsepower of 16,000 horsepower. Not very powerful for its size compared to modern day turbo engines. But yeah. Anyway, this received the exhaust from the main engines, and that's what powered the turbo engine. And then from there, that exhausted into the condensers, and the condensers would condense that steam back down into water for reuse in the boiler room. And these are the massive valves. See what I mean? When I zoom in like that, I get incredibly zoomed in. And then when I zoom back out to try to get to where I was, it's not quite where I was. It's slightly too zoomed out. It just doesn't. Oh, that's why I hate using the zoom feature on this. Anyway, you can kind of see these are the huge valves that permit steam into this room. Absolutely massive valves. But anyway, this was also the room that had a lot of the power generating things. What do you call it? Turbo generators, I guess. They were little steam turbines that when they spun, they generate electricity. And there was quite a few of them in here. They're not easily visible from this vantage point, but we can see the backup ones up here somewhere. I think I have to go up here. The emergency ones were actually not turbo generators, but these were actually... I'm using all of my vocabulary. All my ship vocabulary. Emergency reciprocating dynamos. So these are basically cylinder piston engines, and the steam fed into them from here. And they had cylinder pistons, I think 2 of them, like that, and it spun that dynamo, which is there in the back, and that generated emergency electricity. So these are I think there's 3 of them in this room, but this vent trunk is kind of blocking the view, I think, but it could have been just 2. But anyway, these 2 provide emergency power, and that's why they're so high up. They're actually on the deck above E deck, which would be D deck. But yeah, that's why these are up high. But there are ones down below. Oh, I think actually that's one of them right there. I can't tell, because there are also water pumps, bilge pumps, I should say, bilge pumps down here, and that might be the bilge pump, or that could be one of the power generators, which that one would be a reciprocating generator. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. But you can also see one of the propeller shafts. That is the starboard side propeller shaft. You can kind of see it peeking through there. And it's connected here to this thrust bearing. And Queen Mary also had thrust bearings like this too. It was pretty cool. It was designed so the shaft that was connected to the propeller, one side was propeller, the other side was kind of like this forked kind of thing. And then the propeller shaft that came from the main engines and connected to the propeller part of the propeller shaft also was forked, and they kind of fit together like slots like this. That way, the due to the hydrodynamic forces, the propeller would sometimes move in and out of the ship like this. And so by having these long linkages, it allowed the propeller shaft to keep spinning, but still connected, even though they're moving laterally like this. And so it's actually kind of cool how that worked. And that thrust bearing is kind of like that. I oversimplified it by a lot just to kind of explain it, because I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. But that's basically bare bones how that worked. Now, let's go ahead and show you guys the main engine room. Right. This is kind of the really cool part of this game, is the main engine room. We are now standing at the very top of Titanic's two main engines. We're specifically on top of the port side engine. And these were the 4-cylinder triple expansion reciprocating engines. And it allowed for the expansion of the steam 3 times. So basically, steam would be fed first into this high pressure cylinder, right? So this is the top of the cylinder head. Of course, it's all covered, so that we're looking at the casing of it. But it first came into this cylinder, and it was super high pressure straight from the boilers. And after it was exhausted, it had already lost maybe about 1/3 of its power. And so it was then exhausted into an intermediate pressure cylinder, which was slightly larger, right? Because now you need more surface area to get the power out of that steam. So it came into this, and then when it exhausted out of this, it lost another 1/3 of its power, but it expanded by almost double. And so the steam was then sent to 2 of these large low pressure steam pistons. And so this is one of the 2 large low pressure steam pistons. And the steam came in here, and it exhausted almost the energy pulled from the steam was almost completely lost by the time it exited this cylinder. And here's the other one. So the at the very opposite end of the engine is the other low pressure cylinder. And so that means there's 4 cylinders running this whole engine, but it was only in 3 expansions of the steam. And anyway, all that was left was about, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, again, I'm not a Titanic historian, but if I remember correctly, the amount of pressure that came out of the end of these 2 large steam cylinders was about 9 psi, which is, compared to the I believe it's 120 psi that went into the original steam engine, the original steam cylinder, the first one there. It comes out at 9 psi out of this one, and then from there it flows into the turbo or turbine engine. You can also call it a turbo engine, but anyway, that's how the steam was used. And let's go ahead and go down and see the steam engine in motion. So you can kind of see all the pistons moving and the cranks rotating and all that. So, but we'll get down in there and get a much closer view. These little rods are the eccentric rods. These are like a secondary motion. They push upwards and allow steam to go in and out of the main cylinders. So they use the motion of the crankshaft, the propeller shaft, to open and close valves that permit steam into the main cylinders. So you'll see 4 of these huge main piston cranks. So there's 2 over here, and there's 2 over there. And in between each one is a set of eccentric rods. And that's the flywheel at the end. It can be used to slowly start the engine, because this engine is so huge and so heavy, you couldn't just open a valve and it would immediately rotate, at least maybe not all the time. So they would have that, oh, you can't see it from here, but that massive flywheel has a gearing system, and there would be a little engine connected to that gear. It was called a worm gear, and you started up the little engine and the worm gear would spin, and it would spin that very large flywheel very slowly, and it was just enough speed that you could get the main engines started from that. But when that was not engaged, because as you can see now it's really rotating, it was used as a flywheel, and basically it provides a little bit of momentum. So as the crankshaft moves, that flywheel keeps the momentum, which makes just for a slightly smoother engine rotation. Otherwise, without it, it would be kind of a clunky rotation. It's hard to describe, but it would just be kind of like, it would create more vibration, if you will. And that's just not good for an engine over time. Some people have argued with me about that fact over a while. People have said, oh, you didn't need the flywheel, blah, blah. No, you don't really need a flywheel on an engine. An engine will spin regardless, but it helps for a smoother spin, which in the end is just better for the engine and better for the ship. We can go above. Let's see. I gotta crouch. There we go. Look down and we can see the flywheel. We can see one of the large the piston cranks. Let's see here. I think if I turn this way, I might be able to see more of the engine. Yeah. So, let's see here. Charles Oliver says, good to see you, Alex. Hello, good to see you. MH Real says, thank you for answering my question. You're welcome. Ron says, good afternoon, Alex. Been a while since I was able to attend your live stream. Yeah. It's okay. But I'm glad you're here. Sorry, I was reading another comment just to see if someone was asking me a question, but no question. Okay, so, wow, 43 viewers. But yeah, this is Titanic's engine room. This is actually kind of a cool view. There we go. You can kind of see the starboard engine going. And I will admit, it's really cool to look at this engine. But if you can imagine that little turbo engine that I was telling you guys about, that these two engines exhausted into and drove that little 9 psi turbo engine. That turbo engine provided 16,000 horsepower, right? But actually, just one of these massive 4-cylinder steam engines, the main engines, produced only 14,000 horsepower. So it was actually less than the turbo generator. And now you can see why ships no longer needed to use these massive reciprocating engines. Reciprocating engines are great to look at, but compared to a steam turbine, they just could not produce nearly the amount of speed or horsepower as a turbine engine. And so that's why the turbine engine ended up replacing it. And Queen Mary did not have that. Queen Mary had a turbo engine room with it was 4 separate steam turbines were combined together into one engine, and she had 4 engines. So that's 16 steam turbines ran the Queen Mary. 16 steam turbines ran the Queen Mary. Which is just incredible. But yeah, so and that Queen Mary had what was it? She produced about 200,000 shaft horsepower. So pretty crazy. I think Titanic, what was it? Titanic did, well, I think we can do the math, can't we? Let's see, Alex. What do we 14,000 times 2, 28,000 plus 16,000 is 44,000 shaft horsepower. If I did that math correctly. I'm not very good at doing math in my head, but I think I did pretty well right there with everybody watching me. So I am not known for doing math in my head, that's for sure. Yeah, so pretty neat. Oh, here's a little map. This map specifically shows all the places in this game that you can go on the ship. About 50% of the ship is explorable in this game, and that's what this map shows. So why don't we go see the boilers? Let's see here. We're going to go down Scotland Road to get there. Oh, go to Thomas Andrews' room. Yeah, let's see if we make it there. All right, so we're heading to one of the boiler rooms first. I'll just go ahead and run there because you guys have already seen this room. Now, I forget which door. Oh, number 3 and number 5 boiler room. I can't because my camera's like right in the middle. Number 5 boiler room. So let's do that. Now, what's really cool is is that Titanic's boiler rooms are very similar to Queen Mary's number 1 boiler room. Because Queen Mary, its main boilers, Queen Mary's main boilers were Yarrow boilers, which were water tube type. But Titanic used marine Scotch boilers, which are the wait, let me think. Scotch boilers are the steam tube type. I think I don't want to get into that because it's a lot for you guys. I can describe it. I really can. I know it all. I know how it works, but it's just trying to describe all that engineering to you guys. It's really messing with my brain. But essentially, these Scotch boilers, they had I'm sorry, not steam. It was a fire tube. Jeez, where is my brain? See, this is what I'm talking about. My brain can't handle all this jargon. These marine type Scotch boilers were called fire tube boilers, and that's because, let me get down to the bottom. Woo. Oh, that's right. This boiler room is the one that it's not operating. Where is the one that's operating? Through there. I think this one's blocked off. I have to go this way. There we go. There's the other one. Okay. So each of these Scotch boilers had 3 furnaces on one side and 3 on the other side. They were double-ended. Basically, you stoked a fire in the furnace, and the furnace then vented that hot, like the hot gases and the heat through a series of flues that ran through the boiler and then exhausted into this exhaust shaft, which goes up and up and up all the way out to the top of the ship through the funnels. And that's a fire tube boiler. So if you think about it this way, the fire goes through the tubes, right? And surrounding those tubes in the rest of the boiler is the water, and the water is surrounding the tubes, and it heats up and it boils, and that's what creates the steam for the ship. That's what Scotch boilers do. The Queen Mary's Yarrow boilers were the slight opposite. They did have furnaces, except the furnaces on Queen Mary were, what's the word? They were oil. They burned oil. They burned bunker C fuel oil. And the oil was sprayed. It was atomized. It was sprayed into the furnace and ignited. And that heat then rose up through the Yarrow boiler. Now, the Yarrow boiler is what's called a water tube boiler. So instead of the fire going through the tubes, instead, the water was going through the tubes, and surrounding the tubes was the fire. This was actually a much more efficient way to boil water and to superheat it. Much more efficient way to superheat it. And that's what the Yarrow boilers did. But Queen Mary did have 3 marine Scotch boilers. They each had 4 furnaces on one side and 4 furnaces on the other. So they were actually slightly larger than Titanic's marine Scotch boilers. Just ever so slightly larger. And produced a higher steam pressure than these ones did. Again, that's not to put down Titanic or anything. It's just these are the demands that these ocean liners required for operation. And so we can kind of go over here and see the other side. And that's how those boilers worked. It's actually really cool. Now, Titanic had 29 marine Scotch boilers. I believe 4 or 5 of them, I don't know how many, 4 or 5 of them were only single-ended, which means that one side had furnaces. But as you can see, we just went from one side to the boiler to the other. These are some of the double-ended ones. Now, Queen Mary had 24 Yarrow boilers and 3 marine Scotch boilers. So that's just kind of a comparison between the two. In one of these, see what we're looking at here, this is a coal bunker. And the coal bunkers on Titanic, let me try to get through here. I got stuck. There we go. The coal bunkers on Titanic, so I don't know which way we're facing. I'm sorry, guys. I get lost on Titanic all the time, but I believe that might be starboard. And then behind me is port. I forget. I honestly do. But the coal bunkers were what are called transverse, which means that they run from one side of the ship to the other as opposed to down the length of the ship, like Mauritania or Lusitania. But these transverse coal bunkers, they were positioned between the boiler rooms, and as you can see, the coal would kind of tumble down and be collected by the stokers and then fed into the boilers. I'm trying to find a very specific one. It's hard to get around this room sometimes. There's so many obstacles. Come on. Come on. I'm stuck. Here we go. Okay. All right. We're back to the other side. You guys have heard about the coal fire on Titanic, right? Everybody hears about the coal fire. If I can find it, I think it's in the next room. Should be... Aha! The coal fire. What boiler room is this? This is fire furnace number 2. This can't be boiler room 2. All right, I have no clue which boiler room this is. But anyway, you guys have heard about the coal fire on Titanic, and let me just dispel some rumors here. There's this whole thing about the coal fire weakening the side of the ship, and you could see it in photographs. There's a big black mark on the side of the Titanic's hull where, you know, the coal fire weakened the steel, and that's what allowed the ship to sink. That's all a bunch of baloney. The coal fire was not that big. This is how big it was, you guys. That's it. That's how big it was. It's tiny. Very tiny. And it wasn't even near the side of the ship. Let me show you again. That's the side of the ship. The iceberg would have struck a little bit up there, basically where the ceiling is. Right there. Would have struck bloop, up there and pushed those plates apart, right? But the coal fire isn't near that wall. The coal fire is in the middle of the ship. And it's this tiny little thing at the bottom, right? And what's beneath us, this is the other funny part. What's beneath us isn't ocean. Okay, it's not. It's, you know, first of all, we're standing on a platform that is above the tank tops of the ship. So if we want to stand on the tank tops, let's stand in here. Because this steel right here is the tank tops of Titanic. And that's not the ocean beneath that either. Okay? What's beneath that are the... what are they called? Ballast tanks. What's beneath these are the ballast tanks of Titanic. And the ballast tanks are... I think on Titanic they were 5 feet or 6 feet tall. So a person could almost stand up inside. They were really tight spaces. But yeah. And then there's another set of steel plates underneath. That's what holds back the ocean water. So yeah, if anything, this coal fire would have weakened the top of the tanks. If anything, if. And even then, there's still the outer layer of the hull, which was completely unaffected by this coal fire. Completely unaffected. And that's at the bottom of the ship. That's at the keel. So there's no way it had anything to do with the iceberg disaster. That's my point, folks. That's my point. All right. So let's see. Oh, right. You notice all this coal creates ash, right? They had to dump the ash on the floor. And then another guy, I believe a trimmer, would come by and scoop up the ash into these huge barrels and then bring them over to this ash pit, right? And the idea is they just shovel the ash into this pit here. And then, like a giant toilet, they pull this valve to flush it. And seawater is pumped through the valve and up this pipe. And then, let's see if we can follow it. Do-do-do-do-do. I'm stuck. There we go. Through that pipe, we're still falling. There's the pipe there. We're about to climb on top of it. Goes through the pipe. And then we are above the water line now. So this dark line, this dark bottom half of the room kind of sort of represents where the water line of the ship is. I'm sure it's a little bit lower. But basically that represents where the water line of the ship is. So we're just slightly above the water, and this pipe dumps that ash out. So it's like it's flushed out of the ship through high pressure pumping. And that's how that works. And it's very similar on the Queen Mary as well, because even though the Queen Mary burned fuel oil, the Queen Mary did produce a lot of soot in the process of burning all that oil. And indeed, she did have ejectors to eject the ash and soot that was created from all that oil burning. Just didn't have, I don't think the Queen Mary didn't have nearly as many ash ejectors as Titanic did, because Titanic was always ejecting ash. There was so much of it. Because, you know, it's coal. You burn it and there's a lot of stuff left over. But Queen Mary only needed, I think, 1 ejector per boiler room. So I think that's probably 5 ejectors. There really was no need for that many. But Titanic had, I think, 2 or 4 ejectors per boiler room. Anyway, when the ship came into port, when Titanic would come into port, or I guess it only did that once, right? But they weren't allowed to dump ash or flush it into the ocean when they're at port, because otherwise all the ships would be doing that, and they'd be doing nothing but filling up the ocean floor at the ports with ash until ships could no longer fit without getting grounded on all the ash. So they weren't allowed to dump ash in port. And so what they had to do was, instead, the trimmers would gather all that ash into their buckets and then dump it into this bucket, and then this crane, it's a hydraulic crane, would hoist the bucket from, there's the boiler room, way down below there, would hoist the bucket up here to this room, and this room would be filled with these buckets. And then they would eventually open up this hatch, and then someone on the other side would haul these buckets out and take them to be properly disposed of. But this was only when they were in port, again, like New York or Southampton or Cherbourg. But when they were out in the open ocean, they could flush all the ash down. This door goes directly into one of the steward's bathrooms, which we were in earlier before we came down here. And we are back on Scotland Road. All right, so let's go back into first class, just so we can... So 5 Caps Film says, "Hey Alex, with the Titanic and Queen Mary, since the plates were just riveted, how did water not come through the gaps?" So that's actually a pretty simple response. The plates were riveted together with so much force that it created a watertight. I'm trying to find one of the, but so this is kind of an example. So the idea with the rivets is that they weren't just hammered into place and that's that. The rivets were heated up first to make them pliable so you could hammer them. But that, when you heat up metal, it expands, right? So the molten hot rivets were then placed into the rivet holes to join 2 pieces of steel together, and then they were hammered so that way they were convex on each side. They had a rounded side on each side, and when that rivet cooled, it shrunk and it forced the steel plates together with an incredible force. And that was done throughout the ship. Now, this is just the interiors of the ship, so they only had 1 line of rivets to join the plates on the interiors. But what you'd see on the exterior of the ship was that the plates were often joined with either 2 rows of rivets or up to 5 rows of rivets, depending on where on the outside of the ship it is. But anywhere from 2 to 5 rows of rivets would join 2 plates together. And so the literal force of those plates being sandwiched together like that, under extreme pressure, is what prevented water from coming in. And then you also have pitch. So on rare occasions, if for some reason there was a leak, like sometimes the problem with riveted ships is that ships, they flex when they're on the ocean. As they roll and bob around in the water, or even when they crest waves and things, that makes the ship flex and bend in all sorts of ways. And all those plates will actually kind of slide very, very microscopically, hard to see, but they would slide past each other. And that would loosen the rivets over time. And so that's kind of the major downfall of riveted ships, is that the rivets could loosen. Now, I'm not saying it was guaranteed to happen, because there are ships today, like Queen Mary, that actually do not have any leaks whatsoever, and they're still only held together with their rivets. But if that were to happen, what they could do is use an old trick that dates back to the old wooden sailing ships. They would just take a bit of pitch or tar and fill those gaps. And just, with their finger, the worker could just put a bit of pitch in there, and that would fill the gap and prevent that from being a problem. But one of the other major reasons why there was no water leaks was because the paint on the ship. So you had the anti-fouling paint that was below the waterline that was applied so thick that actually it created a watertight seal, basically. And then above the waterline, you had the black paint on the hulls, and that also created a watertight seal. But yeah, again, if for some reason there was a leak between the plates, they would just put a little bit of pitch, and that would solve that problem. But basically, yeah, the force of the plates, the rivets force the plates together with so much force that it created a watertight seal. So that's how it works. Ozzy says Titanic did come to port in Ghostbusters. Yeah, I remember that. That's pretty funny. All right. Let's see here. Where are we? Oh, I wanted to take you guys to second class. So let's go ahead and I think the easiest way would be C deck, but maybe we'll take you guys to the boat deck just because it's really cool to see the outside of the ship. We haven't seen that today yet. And I don't mind spending a lot of time on the game today, because actually today I don't really have very many other plans, so I have plenty of time to spend on the game. We're on B deck, going up to A deck. And oh, somebody wanted me to show them Thomas Andrews' room. So let me see. I don't think it's here. Well, actually, it might be up above. Oh, we still need to see the first class lounges. We haven't even seen that yet. So let's go up to A deck and see if I remember which one is Mr. Andrews' cabin. I think it's on the other side of the ship, yeah. But we are near the gymnasium, so I might as well show you that. This is Titanic's gymnasium, full of very practical machines for exercise. They have these racing bikes, this punching bag. It's got a name. I don't know what they call the punching bags like that, but a rowing machine. Very, very practical for people who like to row and stuff. You got this electric camel. I believe this is the electric camel, and then the electric. No, these are electric camels. The electric horse that's the electric horse. It's hard to remember because there's a difference. There's an electric horse and there's electric camels. So I think that's the electric horse, and then these are electric camels. And so the idea was that you get on these things and you build the necessary muscles you need for maintaining horseback riding and riding camels. Not that people rode camels a lot, but riding a camel is very similar to riding a horse. Don't ask me. I don't know. It was all very practical stuff. And yeah, this device here, which kind of vibrated your head. So I think, if I remember correctly, oh gosh, it's hard to remember how these things worked. But like, you leaned against this device here, and then I think you put your face against this device. I don't remember. It's hard to remember all these machines. But yeah, this one vibrated, and so it would like vibrate your face or something like that. And then, yeah. It's weird. Anyway, and then this is like kind of like a modern day Bowflex, but I mean, well, I guess this is the antique version of the modern day Bowflex, is what I meant to say. But yeah, although I guess not many kids today would know what a Bowflex is, now that I think about it. So I guess Bowflex isn't modern. Let's take you guys to, oh, well, this way is, I'm so lost. Where am I? Well, I'm near the painting that I always mistaken for a person, which always scares me. Okay, then what's on that side? This room goes to staterooms? No, this doesn't go to staterooms. This goes to the bridge. I'm not ready to take you guys to the bridge yet. So then what about this one? I'm all turned around. Oh, no, I know why. Okay, I have to be on A deck to cross through the... Okay. Well, I wanted to show you guys Thomas Andrews' room. So I guess I have to go through the lounges. Might as well do that. All right, so we're going to go through the first class main lounge. We're going to stop off in the reading and writing room. So this is the reading and writing room. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's for reading and writing. And it's kind of a nice space. It's very Edwardian, it's neoclassical design, but painted white, and it kind of makes me think of the White House when I look at it, actually. I look at this and I'm like, this looks like the White House. But anyway, this is the room for writing. You write letters, postcards, things like that. Yes, they did have postcards back then. I have a postcard from RMS Mauritania from 1911, I want to say. Very cool. It's one of the oldest things I own, is that postcard. And this is the first class lounge, which is just beautiful to look at. Again, this is another one of those rooms where if I were to take a screenshot of this, it would look like a real photograph, as if someone replicated this room inside of a hotel or something, which actually did happen for the Olympic. But yeah, this room is just beautiful, and I can't even believe that this is in a video game. It doesn't look like it's a video game. It looks like a photograph. It's unbelievable. And just sitting here, I don't know if you guys can see it because it's in 1080p. It's not very similar, but the chandelier looks like it's glittering in the light. That's how realistic this looks. But yeah, true story. The paneling from Olympic's first class lounge is now used in a hotel restaurant in England. I don't remember what hotel. Hey, maybe when I go to the UK, I'll visit that hotel if it's along the way. You guys will have to tell me where it is. And if it's in the path of where I'm going, then I'll stop there and look at it. They also have, in the city of Bristol, they have the paneling from RMS Mauritania's main lounge. And that's inside of a bar. And so I know I'll probably be visiting Bristol, so I really want to see that bar and see the paneling from Mauritania's main lounge. But anyway, let's continue on. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. I thought the thing would keep rotating or something, but it actually does stop pretty quickly. All right, so here we go. Okay, so I don't remember which one. Oh, the first one that I entered is Thomas Andrews. So this is Thomas Andrews' cabin. He was the chief engineer of the Titanic, From what I understand, yeah, he was chief engineer of the Titanic, and he was aboard for the maiden voyage just to make sure everything was going okay. Um, what's interesting is we have information on RMSQM Wiki. If you want to know about who the Queen Mary's Mr. Andrews would have been, it was actually a man named John Brown. And so we actually have information about him. And I was lucky enough that I was able to photograph the original slide rule tool that he used for helping create the engineering drawings of the Queen Mary back in 1929. 1929. John Brown did that for the Queen Mary, and so it's just really cool. He had his favorite slide rule. Okay, so when I say it helped make the drawings, what I mean is that, because I know people have said this many times, a slide rule is not a ruler or whatever. It's a calculator. So I understand that. What I mean is that it helped him do the calculations for creating the blueprints, just so people know that I know the difference. So a slide rule is like a calculator. Anyway, it helped him to create the calculations needed for creating the drawings, the blueprints of Queen Mary. So anyway, because there was a lot of math involved in figuring out things and how it all worked and all that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, Queen Mary's Mr. Andrews was Mr. John Brown, who later was knighted. So I believe he was Sir John Brown. But yeah, this was Mr. Andrews' cabin. Isn't that nice? And then you got right across the way is Molly Brown's cabin. The unsinkable Molly Brown. Yep. It's actually kind of cool when you think about it, because their cabins are the only ones in the area. When you really think about it, you're on A deck, near the smoking room, near all that. There's no other cabins near here, just these two by themselves. How weird is that? You know, but cool. It's cool. It's just weird. Let's see what. I suppose one of the biggest benefits to that is having this huge window. You're like the only cabins to have such huge windows like that. So I guess that's a major plus. But yeah, let's look at the smoking room since we're right here. I really love the smoking room. It's so cool. And the linoleum is trippy. I love linoleum. I think it's an extremely misunderstood material in today's modern age, because so many of us grew up, at our grandparents' home and seeing the cheap linoleum on the floors. People think of linoleum as this cheap material that, very fake, and it just, non-luxurious is what people think of linoleum. But the thing is that in Titanic's era, and especially in the era of Queen Mary, linoleum was considered a luxury material and a miracle material. A miracle material because it was hypoallergenic, it was biodegradable, it was long-lasting, it was cheap to make, and it was what's the word? Non-slip. Yeah. Back then it was non-slip. You can make it slippery by applying a special lacquer layer to it to make it shiny. But if you don't apply that, it is non-slip, which is really cool. So that's why they would have used it on Titanic and Queen Mary. And it would not have been glossy. It would have been just like this. It would have been a very matte color. But when people think of linoleum, they think of glossy linoleum, and that's because there was a point in time when people tried to make linoleum look a bit more upscale, and so they made it glossy, which made it slippery. When I was a little kid, I slipped on linoleum. Nearly broke my tailbone, but didn't quite. At least I don't think I did. But, yeah. Here's a little thing. Don't smoke, kids. It's bad for you. But they got stuff here with tobacco, and chewing tobacco. Isn't that crazy? Chew that stuff and spit it out. Never swallow. Never swallow chewing tobacco. And then you had your matches for igniting your cigars and cigarettes and all that. But this was for pipe smoking, so you would see the pipes there. And you'd stuff that in there and ignite it. And all those bad embers and all that smoke would fill your lungs and give you a quick dose of emphysema. Isn't that lovely? Here's a little pantry for serving up the different drinks and even tea and small snacks for people in the smoking room. But right outside the smoking room is the veranda, which is actually kind of interesting. So here's a little Titanic Queen Mary connection here. This little French-looking space was called the veranda on Titanic. And it's like a little garden lounge, essentially. And there's an identical space on the opposite side of the ship. So other side from this wall here. And that was called the Palm Court. But anyway, eventually, White Star Line and the Cunard Line merged in the early 1930s because they were forced to. They didn't want, Cunard didn't want to. White Star really did. They wanted to merge. It was the only way to get them both out of the Great Depression without having to completely sell off all their assets. Nevertheless, the two companies merged, and Cunard had a lot more assets than White Star Line did. So Cunard ended up being the main company in the merger, and the company became Cunard White Star. This meant that when they were building the Queen Mary, they could build a beautiful lounge, a cocktail and nightclub lounge up on Sun Deck. And they thought of what name to give it. And so they were drawing from the history of both companies, right, to create Queen Mary. And so one of the Titanic tie-ins with the Queen Mary was that her nightclub and cocktail lounge on Sun Deck would be called the Veranda Grill. And so the name Veranda comes from this room on Titanic. Maybe not necessarily Titanic. I think they also had a veranda on Olympic as well. But my point is that veranda was a name used on White Star ships, and they ended up using that for Queen Mary and for Queen Elizabeth. Even to this day, there is still veranda restaurants on ships, like I think QE2 had one, and Queen Mary 2 has one as well. Veranda. I think. Please don't quote me on that. Alright, so let's check out the outdoor promenade. Let's see here. All right, so we are near the stern of the ship, looking out over the aft well deck. Another, it looks like a photograph. Looks like a real photograph. It doesn't look like a video game to me. It's so realistic looking. Right beneath us is Titanic's aft well deck. Well decks were designed to break apart the power of an ocean wave that would ride over the ship. So there's a well deck on Titanic's forward side, and that was designed so if a wave came over the bow of the ship and was about to crash into the forward superstructure of the ship, it would actually then drop down into the well deck and kind of lose some of its momentum. And the idea was that the well deck would then have these huge holes to drain it and all that. So they had scuppers and things that could drain all the water away. But they also, Titanic had it for the stern of the ship as well, because the stern of the ship was low enough to the water that it was still possible for a wave to come up behind the ship during a really bad storm. A wave could come up the back end of the ship, and instead of it crashing into the rear superstructure, which as you can see has these beautiful windows and things, all this stuff that's very susceptible to being broken by huge waves, the wave would then drop down into the well deck and kind of lose some of its momentum, and then it would be forced to fall off the sides of the ship. That's what well decks are for. Queen Mary is the only Cunard liner to have ever had a well deck, and she has only one, a well deck on the forward, on the bow. She doesn't have a stern well deck. And part of that reason is because most of the Queen Mary is high enough off the water that you really wouldn't expect very many waves to come up that high. In fact, I'm trying to think, but yeah. The hull of Queen Mary, most of it comes up to what would be the promenade deck on Titanic. So there really was no worry about waves that big. That being said, there were several waves that did come up over the bow of Queen Mary and even over her stern as well. There was one wave that came up so high, it came up to promenade deck level on the Queen Mary, which promenade deck level on Queen Mary is equivalent to the boat deck on Titanic. So it's one deck above this. That's how tall the wave was. It was so powerful, it lifted one of the cowl vents right off its mount and sent it crashing through the forward promenade windows, right in front of the observation bar. And it nearly could have killed a man and his little boy who were walking through that forward promenade area. It was an enclosed area, just like this, how this is enclosed to protect it against the weather. And it sent it through windows, much like these, sent it crashing right through. Yeah, pretty interesting, I think. I'm going to make a video about the similarities between Titanic and Queen Mary, because there are a lot of similarities. The ships by no means are considered similar ships, but they do have a lot of little aspects about them that are very similar. So, really cool. And the people that run the Queen Mary, some of them have asked, if I could give them a bit of detail about the similarities between the two ships, because they want to do something that would involve that information. So I want to make a video about it and maybe send them the link to that video, so that way they could see it. Five Caps Films says, does Titanic have a clipper or fantail stern? Titanic has what's called a clipper stern, because it's the same as on a clipper ship. A fantail stern is like what Normandy had, SS Normandy. The two look very similar, but they're not the same. They're not the same. So a difference would be like on a clipper stern, it's high off the water. A clipper stern is high off the water, and it's rounded, as you can tell. It's, I often compare it to, like, if you looked at it from the side, it looks kind of like a toilet bowl. But on a fantail stern, like on Normandy, it's low to the water. So the bottom of the circular part is actually touching the water. So there actually is a difference there. And then Queen Mary has what's called a... Let's see if I remember it. a... I don't remember. I don't remember what it's called. Queen Mary's stern. I know it. I'm having difficulty recalling a lot of the informational jargon. Cruiser, thank you, 5 caps. A cruiser stern, yes. Because they were used on British warship cruisers prior to being on Queen Mary. And the cruiser stern became really popular for a long time. There were so many ships for like 30 years that were given cruiser sterns because they were such a successful design. Again, originally used by military, but it was such a successful design that ships over the course of 30 years were given cruiser sterns. It was incredible. You know, we think about Titanic and the clipper stern. A lot of ships in that era had clipper sterns because it was considered a very successful design, but it only lasted maybe 10 years, and then they stopped with that. They went to fantail. Fantail sterns really became popular right after the clipper stern. My computer's freaking out. It's like, what's going on? There's too much detail. All right, so now we'll go down one level. Oh, right, I was going to take us to the, where are we? Oh, we're at the stern of the ship. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the forward end of the ship. We'll go to the the place where the what do you call it? Yeah, whatever. My brain is slowing down just like my computer. My goodness. I think I'm getting tired. Hey, Lachlan. Or was that? Yeah. So Chris Surface is also here. Okay, so let's go up the main staircase. Yeah, you can. Yeah, my game's getting pretty laggy. It wasn't like that at all throughout all this time. It's just, I think my computer's even getting tired of the game too. My computer's like, this is too much. This is where Jack met Rose, up on by the clock. The clock supposedly called Crowning Glory, I think it is. Okay, so Diamond says, does the forward superstructure have rooms in this demo? Yeah, there are. I'd have to go back down to get to it. Let's see if I remember where it is. There we go. There we go. Everything's getting less laggy because I'm away from all the detail. Another, see, steel wall on the left here. Steel wall. So you have the decorated wall on the right hand side, the decorated ceiling hiding the bare steel, but then all of a sudden, bare steel wall. I know it doesn't look terrible. Of course not. It doesn't look terrible. But when when I say that Titanic's beautiful, but only where it's at, that's what I mean. It's like there just are areas of the Titanic that just are not decorated. So this is one of the staterooms in the forward superstructure of Titanic. If we were to look out that window, which is very hard to do in this game, but if we were to look out that window, you would see the bow of the ship. So this is one of those rooms. And then turn around. That's what it looks like from this angle. And then there's one on the other side of the ship, the port side. But, yeah. All right, let's go back up to the bridge. That's where we're trying to go. Yeah, my computer doesn't like this area of the ship because it's so detailed. It's like trying to load in all the detail. And maybe if I just sit still for a moment, let the computer kind of load it all in. Okay. Nope, still laggy. All right. These are the machines at the top of the lifts that allow the lifts to move. Now we're going to go see the Marconi room and then the bridge, and then we'll kind of walk around the boat deck. Oh, man. My back is really hurting. Okay, so we are in the Marconi wireless room. And on the left is the room where the two wireless operators would have slept. They needed to be as close to the machine as possible for emergencies and stuff like that. They even had a skylight for fresh air, which is really cool. I think partly also because this room would have gotten super hot because the Marconi machine produced a lot of heat. Because when you really think about it, to run the Marconi machine, it would have been like a little mini power plant, honestly. It just produced a lot of heat. And it was really powerful, sent out really powerful radio signals. And you could have gotten electrocuted if you touched the wrong stuff. So it really dangerous. But you can see the little the vacuum tubes that came in. So down at the purser's desk, they would put people's telegrams, they handwritten, put them in these tubes, and then send them through the system. I forget what these systems are called. These vacuum tube systems. It's gonna come to me, and I'm not gonna remember it. Anyway, they would send it through there from the purser's desk, and it would come through to here, and then they would send those out. And so when they weren't sending out signals or distress calls and stuff like that, they were just transferring telegraph stuff, people's telegrams and stuff and whatnot. They were called pneumatic tube. Yeah, pneumatic tubes. I guess that's just. I thought there was a different name to it, but I mean, yeah, they are pneumatic tubes. I could have sworn there was a name, just like how this is a telegraph system, right? But this is called a Marconi, right? So while these are pneumatic tubes, I would have thought they had a different name to them. Anyway, oh, my back. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, they were mostly sending people's telegrams, but occasionally the ships did need to talk to each other, and for that purpose, like for instance, Titanic received a bunch of iceberg warnings, and so those came in through the Marconi. This is the room that has the amplifier. So this is kind of like a power generator. I think it's really more of like a transformer, really. It takes the power, winds it up, and makes it even more powerful. I'm not an electrician, but I mean, I know the basics. But yeah, and then you have all this sand here. These buckets of sand were used if for some reason this room caught fire. And that's because all this machinery with all these open wires and things, and all of it could overheat. Any of it could spark. Any of it could ignite, especially all these batteries. My goodness, there's all these batteries here. They could leak, they could ignite, they could explode. Any of that stuff could happen. And so to prevent the spread of fire on the ship, they had these buckets of sand that you could dump on the fire to choke it. So that is the Marconi machine. Believe it or not, the Queen Mary also had Marconi machines for sending out telegrams and sending out telegraph signals and all that kind of stuff. So there was a Marconi on Queen Mary as well. All right, let's go to the bridge. And here we are inside the wheelhouse of the bridge. And then this is what the area behind the wheel looked like. Let me... Yep, this is the other side. So let me kind of explain. There's two telemotor helms, right? And they were actually, I mean, so, okay. Let me put it this way. There was technically one telemotor helm up here. And that's it right here. This is the telemotor helm, this device. But there are two helms connected to it. There's this helm and the helm over there. You can tell they're connected because here's the bronze or brass tube that goes through there, and then it connects to the other tube over here. These white boxes just have a gear system. Can we see it from here? Sorry, I know I'm going back and forth so much. I'm trying to explain something, and I just realized it. No, they don't show it. Okay. Inside that box would have just basically been a special gear system that allows one horizontal tube to turn this way, the other vertical tube turns that way, and they work together like that, right? They're like a gear system. So that's what's inside those boxes. But anyway, one telemotor helm connected with two helms. And so this helm would have been used when they came into port. It allows the helmsman to see through the windows and know exactly where they are and blah, 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 blah. All that kind of stuff. They can see a lot more stuff out through here. But when the ship was out at sea, it used the wheelhouse, which was closed off to protect from the weather. And the wheelhouse had not as good of a view of the ocean as this part of this helm up here. But you didn't need that when you're out at sea, because when you're out at sea, it was nothing but open ocean mostly, and you know, other ships would always relay their position and stuff like that. So the navigation officers would always be on top of that. You know, if there was icebergs in the way, they would get iceberg warnings, and so the captain or the first officer or whoever else was on watch to make sure that the ship was going, they would always be able to relay that information to the helmsman and command the helmsman to turn whichever way was necessary. So there really was no reason to need to see out the front of the ship when you're out in the middle of the ocean. There's just no need. It's also the same reason why ships don't have headlights, you know. But a lot of people ask about that, like, didn't Titanic have a headlight? Why couldn't they see the iceberg? Ships don't have headlights because honestly, even the best headlights on a car and stuff like that, or even on a locomotive of a train, they really can only see as far as maybe from this, if you know, this railing here, if you're there, it could probably see as far as the very tip of Titanic right there. That's how far even some of the best um, the best headlights can see. And let me tell you, that's a distance of well over 100 feet. You know, maybe some spotlights and things. Like Queen Mary had really powerful spotlights that were located on the Monkey Bridge right above the wheelhouse on Queen Mary. And those could maybe see 300 feet at best, right? So headlights on a ship are useless because they can only see at best 300 feet in front of the ship. That's not enough for the ship to turn to avoid an object when at speed. It just doesn't matter. So, and even then, most of the time in the open ocean, there's a lot of various weather conditions. A lot of times you're in fog or there's huge waves in the way. You know, you really wouldn't see objects until you're right up on it. The best chance you have is the lookouts on the lookout, you know, crow's nest, or for Queen Mary, they eventually had radar. Eventually, Queen Mary didn't get radar until after World War II, believe it or not. So she had all the same technologies as Titanic before World War II in order to see where they were going. But another thing that Queen Mary had going for her is that they put Queen Mary's wheelhouse a whole deck higher than like where Titanic was. So let me put it this way: Titanic's wheelhouse is located, you know, basically on the boat deck, whereas Queen Mary, they put hers 2 decks higher than that. Yeah, and there's officers' quarters right through these windows here, right? On Titanic, on Queen Mary, the wheelhouse is a deck above that. So that's kind of what I mean. Oh, here's a cool view of the funnels. Again, looks like a photograph. It's so real. So, let's see here. Right. What time is it? 3:18. Olympics wheelhouse was rounded. I didn't know that. Yeah. I don't know much about Olympic and Titanic. Whatever I know about is basically what I can see from pictures and stuff, so I'm not all that knowledgeable about Titanic. I mean, I know I probably have said a lot of stuff about Titanic in this video so far, but compared to other people, my knowledge is nothing. There's people who could run circles around me with their knowledge of Titanic, honestly. And you know, if anything, all my knowledge is with the Queen Mary, because I've spent more time studying the Queen Mary than any other ship. But yeah, why don't we take a walk on the boat deck to get to different places? These are the lifeboats, clinker-built lifeboats, all wooden. You know, these davits too. After World War II, Queen Mary, well, I guess during World War II, Queen Mary had 2 sets of these davits. They were placed on the stern of the ship. It was because they held so many troops. The ship became a troop ship. Queen Mary became a troop ship during World War II. And to try to accommodate all the extra people on the ship, which far exceeded the ship's regular passenger capacity, they had to add lifeboats to the Queen Mary, mainly in the form of rafts, but they did have some wooden lifeboats for the Queen Mary, and they used these exact same Welland davits, the exact same ones. They had the same company, the Welland Davit Company, produce davits for the Queen Mary, and she had two different types of Welland davits. She had these ones, which are the same height and everything as Titanic, and then she had slightly larger ones, like the ones that were seen on, I think, slightly larger Welland davits were placed in a certain part of Britannic. So I know Britannic had the huge, giant, crane davits. I know that, but I believe there's a part of Britannic, maybe near the stern somewhere, where they had the extra large Welland davits. But I don't remember. I'd have to look at a picture. But Queen Mary had both. She had these size Welland davits and the extra large Welland davits as well. Um, Promenade. Oh, I walked right past the first class area. That's right over there. That's funny. I was gonna go over there, but I was talking, so I just walked right past it. Um, yeah. I like the green color on some of these. These are winches, but pretty cool. Gosh, it's so quiet. I don't remember the game being this quiet. I could have sworn there was at least the sound of the ocean or something here, but I love this view off the stern. The view off the bow is cool, but there's something about the view off the stern that I think is just kind of really neat. I don't know. Maybe it's because you can see a lot more layers of the ship from up here. Maybe that's what it is. But yeah, it's neat. There's so many similarities between Titanic and Queen Mary. You know, many ships had these docking bridges. That's what they're called, docking bridges. It allowed during docking, it allowed the workers to kind of see over the sides of the stern of the ship to make sure that the ship is being docked properly and is not going to collide with anything, and all that jazz. Queen Mary also had a docking bridge very similar to this. The only difference is that it also had a wheelhouse. So you can kind of see that the helm on this docking bridge is up above and it's exposed to the air. While on Queen Mary, they had this same setup, but it was underneath and it was enclosed in its own little wheelhouse. And so they would just relay instructions. They would shout instructions from up on the docking bridge down to the wheelhouse for them in case they needed to. That's what that was for. But on Titanic, it's exposed. I think that they would have had this covered with canvas on Titanic while the ship was out at sea, but it's uncovered here in the game, so you can see it and appreciate it basically. This is another thing that I don't know about Titanic. You see this steel beam that goes right up to the, what is it, mizzen mast? If I have that right, mizzen mast. Is that right? Mizzen mast. Or is that forward mast? Main mast. Gosh, wow. I don't know. Anyway, there's this white steel beam. What is that for? I know it's for something. There's nothing on a ship is just because. There's always a reason why something is on a ship. If I had to venture a guess, because right beneath us, can I go down somehow? Here, let me go through here. Oh, I forgot. We can't see it unless we're out on first class. Okay, well, we can see the backside of it. So the next level below is A deck, right? Beyond this window is a vent fan room, right? So there's ventilation fans in there, and it helps to suck air from outside the ship and blow it into the ship. Or maybe these ones are the reverse ones where they suck air from inside the ship and blow it out. I don't know which ones they are because the ship had both types. Very very common to use. Um, I'm thinking that what that steel beam is for is it's actually a monorail crane. They use them a lot in the ships in their various engineering areas. And what it would have been was a steel I-beam, even though it looks like a square here. It would have been a steel I-beam with a little hand pulled little crane thing on it that rode the rail, and it would have been to allow them to haul heavy machinery out of that fan room and out into the open for maintenance, like so they would have taken it off the ship and stuff like that. But you have to pull it out of the room, and you probably can't do that by hand because it's so heavy and the doorway is so small. So maybe there would have been a monorail crane riding this beam, and they would just chain it all up, hoist it up, and then roll the thing out into the open deck for another crane to lift off of the ship. I think that's what it was. I'm doing that using deductive reasoning because I don't really know what this steel beam was for. But everything on these ships had a purpose. Everything. Five Cap Film says, Alex, on the forecastle deck, what are all those black things that look like horns? It's a good question. Well, let's see. What is your other question? Also, Alex, there are ropes that go to the tops of the mast that look like ladders. What were they and why did they look like that? So the ropes that look like ladders are ladders. Those are rope ladders. And they're designed to get crew up to the mast because some of these cables some of them are for like these here. These are support cables. They help support the top of the mast and prevent it from wiggling around in rough weather and all that kind of stuff. But some of these cables, like these four here, that are there's a bar holding four cables apart, and that goes all the way down the length of the ship, kind of going above the funnels. Let me get a better vantage point. Bloop. You can see those four cables going all the way to the other mast at the forward end of the ship. That's the long-range telegraphs. That's the long-range telegraph antenna, I mean to say. And so a lot of that is all part of the rigging. So rigging is just anything that's rigged to the masts. It could be support cables or it could be antenna. But either way, sometimes crew needed to get up onto these masts in order to fix the rigging, tighten it, loosen it, whatever. And so they would first either use the steel ladder up against the base of the mast, or if they need to go higher, they'd use the rope ladders to get even higher up. And then what you can't see, but above the rope ladder, there would have been steel pegs that came out of the mast going all the way to the tippy top, steel pegs. And so they would have climbed those steel pegs to get up to the very top. It's the same kind of steel pegs where if you're in the United States and you see those wooden or even the steel ones, the power line poles often have steel pegs coming out of them, so that way the workers could climb up to the top of the power line. It's the same thing. They would have had pegs going up the sides of the top of the mast, but to get up there first, you would use these rope ladders. Now, let's go answer your question about the horns, because I gotta go see that myself, because I don't know what it is you're talking about. But let's go over there. I'll have to cycle through some areas first. That's scary. Yeah, it is scary. I wouldn't want to be up there. It's really high up. Those masts are well over 100 feet tall. I mean, yeah, I would not want to be up there. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. F. Into here. Okay. Things that look like horns on the bow. You said they're black things, so because there were some things that were painted black, but I don't see anything that's painted black that looks like horns. On the forecastle deck, what are all those black things that look like horns? Oh, they're the green things. Oh, it's the winches. Yeah, so those, yeah. These are the winches. Some of them are electric, some of them are steam powered, depending on which ones you look at. But yeah, they're all the winches. And so they would, so these drums on the side, you would wind the rope around those, and then using friction, you would start up the winch, but using friction, those drums would roll and the friction would pull the rope. So that's kind of how it worked. It used the friction of the rope wound around that drum to help it to pull things. And so those winches were used for various things, like you can see that Titanic has a single boom crane. It's this thing that looks like a pipe, and it goes all down the length of the mast. And you can see the hinge right there. And so that's a boom crane. And to operate the boom, it needed winches attached to it and ropes attached to the end of it, and they could kind of steer it around that way. It had one winch to control the up and down motion of the crane, and then it had two other winches to control the sideways motion of the crane, because they could swing it around to drop things on and off the ship. And so there's that, and then there's also a smaller crane over here. This is for the anchors. This is specifically, this white crane here, specifically for the emergency anchor, the spare anchor. And that would have had its own pulleys and attachments and whatnot. I think, in fact, maybe this winch was used for that crane. I don't remember, but yeah, that's what all that was. All right. So it is 3:34. Been on this live stream for 2 hours and 30 minutes. I am exhausted. And yeah, I think I'm gonna call it quits for today. Trying to think. I've had a really, really busy past couple of weeks, but the good news is that lots of good stuff is coming for the channel, especially in next year when I take my trip to the UK. I'm really excited about that. So I don't think I'm going to announce when I'm going, just like the last time I went to the Queen Mary, for instance. I didn't tell people when I was going, again, because there are people who would create a lot of problems if they knew where I was going, and they would try to meet me there and that kind of stuff. There's people that really don't have the best intentions in mind. which is kind of sad because there's a lot of folks that I want to meet. There's lots of like fans on the channel that I want to meet, and I'd love to do like get-togethers and things, but I can't do it because of the scary people. So, yeah, so for that reason, I can't tell you guys when I'm going, but let's just say I'll be going to the UK late next year, late next year. So after summer, before winter, that kind of thing. But nevertheless, the build up to getting to that point is going to be wild because I have to make all these arrangements. I'm going to have to contact a travel agent to help me out because there's going to be so many destinations that we're going to be going to, things that need to be booked in advance, all that kind of stuff. And that's like a lot to keep track of. But I also need to get my passport. Oh my goodness, so much stuff. But I'm really excited for that, and I'm really thankful to all the people that first of all that donated to help me to do that, but also for those folks that hate that people donated to me. Most of the expenses are going to be covered by me on this whole trip. I'd say like it's more of a like I received a third of the trip was through donations, and the other 2/3 of the trip is going to be paid out of pocket by me. So, but nevertheless, I'm really thankful to people that donated, and the donation page is still up. But it'll help over time if people keep adding to that, because then I can go on that trip and I'll have extra money to work with, and I won't have to go on such a tight budget. But nevertheless, it's happening. So I'm really thankful for that. I'm really happy to finally do that and take the trip aboard the Queen Mary 2 both ways across the Atlantic, see tons of cities in the UK, and then see some places in France, and film all that content for you guys so that way I can make more history videos, more travel content and stuff. It was really exciting to do the New Orleans trip, and this one's going to be even more exciting. So anyway, folks, thank you all so much for watching. This was absolutely lovely, and I have to try to do a live stream every Saturday, honestly, with all you guys. But yeah, so thanks guys for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.